Greetings and Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Lari Fatma Hassan from the Center for Global and Strategic Studies, Islamabad. And I welcome you all to this Online International Internship Program, The Contemporary Dynamics of Indonesia, that is jointly organized by the Embassy of Indonesia to Pakistan and Center for Global and Strategic Studies, Islamabad. To formally begin today's session, I would like to invite His Excellency Adam Mulawarman Tugio. He is the Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Pakistan for his opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Dear participant, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dr. Khalid Tamur, distinguished Dr. Khalid and from Center for Global Strategic Studies of Islamabad, Dr. Gaffar from University of Gajah Mada, Indonesia, and also the distinguished participants for today's discussion. I would like, first of all, to extend a very warm welcome to all my dear participants on these online international internship programs being organized with the objective to make you all more familiar with the contemporary dynamic of Indonesia. Thank you. I'm encouraged to learn the response and from the participants about Indonesia by joining these programs. As you are all aware that Indonesia and Pakistan, we share a lot of values, and we enjoy an excellent bonds of friendships with, based on the very strong foundations of bilateral relations. And it is important, certainly, that we also to expand the knowledge toward the young generations, so that it could pave the ways to increase and strengthening more the bilateral relations between the two countries. In this regard, these internal internship programs, I believe, provide a good opportunity to learn more about Indonesia as the largest Muslim populations countries and the third largest democracies in the world. We will be very pleased if you could explore and suggest more avenues for cooperations between Indonesia and Pakistan after the completions of your internships programs. I believe that Indonesia offers many interesting features for students and researchers, such as the state's policies of reconciliations, peaceful coexistences, the conflict resolutions, the pluralisms, ethnic and cultural diversities, with Indonesia also home to around 25 million Christians and significant Hindu and Buddhist minorities. In terms of economics, certainly we up 20s of world economy and the trillions of dollar economies. With the booming economies and also increased sales market also for Pakistan, especially if you want to expand the Indonesia and look at the prisms of the ASEAN, whereby Indonesia is also being part of members. I hope that the above features will trigger your spirit of learning and try to further explore about Indonesia with the help of your learned teachers. Finally, I certainly would be missed if I don't express the appreciations to Center for Global Strategic Studies and joining us to support this program. We hope that all participants would have a good experience, a good learning experience, and productive internship programs. And I will also allowing myself to also joining you because I believe that there is a lot that we can learn from the expert who will share their thought on Indonesian aspect, which to some extent would be also beneficial for Pakistani students. Well, once again, thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, His Excellency, for your remarks. Now, the theme of today's session is Indonesian politics between Islam and nationalism. And we are joined by Dr. Abdul Gaffar Karim. He is from the Faculty of Political Science at the Gajah Mada University from Yogjakarta, Indonesia. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Hassan. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone in Islamabad, and good afternoon from Indonesian time. Selamat siang, Pak Dubes. Terima kasih. It is really so honored to me to be in this session, and I have heard about this session from my colleague, Dr. Diki Sofyan, which I believe also give my name to the ambassador regarding these topics. So my name is Abdul Gaffar Karim. You can call me Gaffar. And I am an associate professor at the Department of Politics and Government at Gajah Mada University, in which I am also currently the head of the department. And my focus of area has been the Islamic studies and electoral politics. So in this very short opportunity, I will present some general ideas about Indonesian politics, in which we can place the question, the debates of Islam and nationalism in Indonesia. And I should mention that it is still a big issue still this day, although it's getting more pragmatic rather than ideological, but people are still talking about the position of religion in Indonesian politics. And in this opportunity, I will draw some attentions to some of the aspects of these debates. Please allow me to share my screen. Let me see.
Yes, you may share your screen. You have the option to share.
Okay. So, Ms. Hassan, is it visible already?
Yes, it is visible, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I'm going to talk about the Indonesian politics, and there are many aspects of Indonesian politics, but today I will look at specifically at the debates between Islam and nationalism in Indonesia. It is interesting that although Indonesia is the home to the largest Muslim group in the world, about some 80 to 85% of the populations are Muslim, but we decided not to be a religious-based politics. But that is not a very easy decision, because there has been prolonged debates about the position of Islam in Indonesian state. So in this session, we will look at some aspect of that. First, let's look at the country itself. I believe many of you has already been familiar with Indonesia, but probably it is a good idea to highlight some feature. So if we look at the map, well, Indonesia probably is, I don't know, 5 hours flight from Islamabad. I've been to India, but honestly, I've never been to Pakistan. When I was doing my PhD in Australia, one of my senior scientists that I was working with was Professor Samina Yasmin from Islamabad. And I believe she is the granddaughter of Muhammad Iqbal. She is a political scientist in the University of Western Australia. So Indonesia in general is, as you can see, is an archipelago that is located in between Asia and Australia. It is geopolitically important, but there are some aspects of the economy that also lead Indonesia to some problems. I guess we can discuss that later in other sessions. But let us look at some social and political aspects of Indonesia as a country. First, from the social political perspective, while Indonesia has 17,000 islands, there are many versions of this. Some say that there are 24,000 islands. Some said that there are only actually 4,000 islands. Well, that depends on how you look at it. Some people define any rock appear from the sea as an island, and that's why some of them come up with 24,000 islands. Some said that we can only call island if there are some elements of it, not only rock, but also the soil and water or something. Some others said we call island if it's inhabitable. So let's say in the middle we have 17,000 islands, according to one version. There are about 260 million people. It's a very populous country. It's the fourth most populous country in the world. If you go to Java, I don't know how many of you have been to Indonesia and have been to Java. Java is a highly dense island. They say that Java is the island with the highest density on the planet because there are almost 1,000 people per kilometer square in Java. And the price of land in Java is also really expensive as compared to other islands. So, and there are hundreds of ethnic groups. Indonesia is not a single political entity, not a single social entity. It consists of hundreds of ethnic groups. I myself have a ethnic group background from a smaller ethnic group called Madura, a Madurist group located in the East Java. But the vast majority of Indonesia is Javanese. No less than 60% of Indonesians are Javanese, and also about 60% of Indonesian people live in the island of Java, which is not the largest island in Indonesia. That's why Java is the island with the highest density. We also have hundreds of religious groups, if we count all sorts of religions. But the state government only acknowledge six official religion, including Islam, Christianity, Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism. Only those large global religion. But there are also some smaller religious group that may have different characteristic from those global religious group, but they are religious group nevertheless. So there are hundreds of them in a smaller part of Indonesia. If you look at the figures here, 87%, 87.2% of Indonesians are Muslim. So Muslims are the majority, but yet again, Islam is not, there is no single Islam in Indonesia. There are some subgroup of Muslim in Indonesia. There are at least two largest Islamic organizations in Indonesia, the so-called Muhammadiyah movement and Nahdlatul Ulama movement, two of the most leading institutions, religious institutions in Indonesia. So 87.2% of Indonesians are Muslim, demographically. The rest are Protestant, Catholics, Hindu, Buddhist, and Confucianist, and other smaller religions, all across the country. So demographically speaking, Indonesia is predominantly Muslim because more than 87% of Indonesians are Muslim. But if you look at the figure below, we can also see that geographically, it's not easy to say that Indonesia is really predominantly Muslim, because there are some huge part of Indonesia is actually predominantly Christians, and there are some smaller part that are predominantly Hindu. For example, Bali. Many people outside Indonesia knows Bali better than Indonesia, and because Bali is the tourist destinations. And Bali is a predominantly Hindu area with some special characteristics. So that is the social outlook of Indonesia, and that's why the debate on the position of Islam in Indonesian state is very important. It's very central until today. again, although the tone has been, somewhat swaying from ideological to more pragmatic tone, as we will discuss later. So that is the social outlook of Indonesia, the archipelago. And let's continue with a more political outfit of the country, the political characteristic of the country. I would like to draw your attention to the archipelagic characteristic of Indonesia first, because as you can see, it's very much different from Pakistan in a way that Indonesia is actually, scattered around over the oceans, across the South China Sea to the Indian Ocean. And so we have so many coastline in Indonesia, and that also lead to some characteristic in Indonesian diplomacy that the ambassador can highlight later if he will. So let's look at the Indonesian political outfit then. Oh, I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Okay, now Indonesia is based on the 1945 constitutions. 1945 is the year where Indonesia proclaimed the independence, and the Indonesian state was formally established. And we declared that the constitutions signed in 1945 to be the Indonesian constitution. That's why it's called the 1945 constitutions. There has been some effort to change the constitutions, or at least to amend the constitutions, but most of the attempts failed because there are some resistance of political actors. The Indonesian state ideology is Pancasila. It's a Sanskrit word. Pancha means 5, sila means principle. And as you can see, this is the Indonesian symbol of the Garuda bird. I think it's very much adopted from Indian myth of the bird of Garuda, the mythical bird of Garuda, a mythical eagle that we believe represent the spirit of freedom, in which Indonesia can look up itself as a freedom country. And this bird in the symbol bear the coat of arms with the 5 symbol of the 5 principles. The first principle being belief in God. And the second principle is the humanism. The third principle is nationalism. The fourth principle is democracy. And the fifth principle is the social justice. So this is you can see in the coat of arms, in the front of the state symbol, represent the Pancasila principle. There has been some debate about the Indonesian form of state, but in most of time of history, Indonesia has been a Unitarian state. Since 1945, we were a federal state for a couple of months in 1949 to 1950s, but apart than that, we have been a Unitarian state from 1945 till today. Although Indonesia is a very huge, geographically a very huge state, and consists of many political sovereignty, but we choose Unitarian state, and we survive the option till today. We practice decentralized politics, decentralized government, but in somewhat centralized politics. During the so-called New Order era, Indonesia is very much a centralized politics and government. But today, the government is decentralized. Local government have their power to perform policy, but there are somewhat centralized politics through the political parties, because political parties are still very much centralized in Indonesia. So that's why we can say that Indonesia practices decentralizations, but within a centralized logics of politics. We have presidential government, meaning our executive branch is led by the president, who is directly elected by the people every 5 years. Since 2019, we performed the simultaneous elections in which the president is elected by the people. At the same time, they elect the members of the legislative bodies. And speaking of the legislative bodies, we have bicameral legislatures, semi-bicameral legislature actually, because we have the House of Representatives, we have the Senate-like structure called the Dewan Perwakilan Daerah, or the Council of Regional Representative. Very similar to the senators, but a little bit different because we are unitarian state. We don't actually need a structure like Senate. And last thing that we need to highlight regarding the political outlook is that we had a political reform in 1998. It's about 23 years ago. There was a huge political change in which General Suharto stepped down from power, and then we start to perform some more democratic government in Indonesia. So that is the political outlook of Indonesian state. And let's have a look at the, anyway, feel free to interrupt me anytime if there are some that you need to clarify, or if you want to give comment or ask questions. So again, I will divide this presentation into 4 general topics, and we have looked at the first topics, and anytime you need to ask something, feel free to do it. So let's continue to the political history. So very quickly look at the political history of more than 75 years, or almost 76 years of Indonesian history. So Indonesia, in general, we can say that Indonesia has gone through series of ideological debates and struggle. This is the picture of the committee for the preparation of Indonesian independence. Standing in front of the other audience is our first president, Sukarno, who, by the way, is, he really adored Muhammad Ali Jinnah. In many of his speeches, he mentions Muhammad Ali Jinnah as a big patriot, big person who changed the course of history. So there is Sukarno, our first president, also known as the proclamator of the independence. And he is the proponent of Indonesian nationalism. He is the proponent of Indonesian Unitarian state. Until today, he is one of the leading figure in the nationalism of Indonesia. And he was in a long debate with some leaders of Islamic political parties regarding the ideology of Indonesian state. So let's look at the timeline of Indonesian history. So this is the general timeline. I just pick up some really important years of Indonesian history with regard to the discussion of Islam and nationalism and Indonesia. So Indonesia was established as a state. Indonesia was established in 1945. But before that, we were known as the Dutch East Indies, colonial state under the control of the Dutch government. So I need to mention this because there are some events prior to 1945 that characterized the debate of Indonesian, the position of Islam and nationalism in Indonesian state. So in 1930s, we have a representative body called the Volksraad. Volksraad here is from Dutch language, meaning it's the Council of the People. It's a representative body established by the colonial government for prominent local leader to be part of the political decision. In 1934 or 1935, I'm not too sure about the year, but around that, there was some people, some Islamic leaders in Indonesia established a structure called MIAI, the Majlisul Islam A'la Indonesia. Majlisul Islam A'la Indonesia. It's in Arabic language. The meaning is the highest council of Indonesian Islam. So we start to use the term Indonesia, although we are officially called the Dutch East Indies. Dutch East Indies. So this MIAI made appeal to the Volksraad, asking the opportunity to incorporate Islamic zakat with the Dutch colonial text. So some people didn't want the Muslim to pay two kinds of tax. First, the zakat, and then second, the colonial tax. So they make appeal that they could combine those mechanisms. So for those who already pay the zakat, they may have some deduction in their tax. That's the idea, but it was rejected. So far that we know, it was rejected by the Volksraad, and that's never part of the policy. So that's probably one of the pre-Indonesian event in the history that reflect the characteristic of the debate between the Islamic and secular perspective of public affairs in Indonesia. So in 1945, we proclaimed the independence on the 17th of August 1945. But about 2 months prior to that, in June, July, August, so 2 months prior to the independence, the Indonesian leaders were busy formulating the state ideology and formulating the state constitutions. In the 1st of June 1945, Sukarno made the speech that was later known as the Pancasila speech. He offered 5 principles to be the foundations of new state to be established in August. He said that one of the principles can be the believing in God, while the others were democracy, internationalism or humanism, socialism, and democracy. So Sukarno said that believing in God is part of the foundations of Indonesian state. So that's why there are some very wide door for Islam to be in the politics in Indonesia. This speech then later be the basic inspirations of the work of a small committee consisting of 9 people, 9 leaders of Indonesia, to formulate the state ideology. And it is interesting that only 21 days following the speech, the committee already formulated the state ideology, the 5 principles, the Pancasila, and the first principle being believing in God with the obligations to perform Islamic Sharia for the adherent of Islam. So this first principle really gives a strong basis actually for Islamic Sharia to be implemented in modern Indonesia, although limitedly only apply for those who adhere most Islam, only for Muslims, not for non-Muslim people. But then, in a very quick turbulent situations, the first principle was changed from long formulations about Sharia Islam being implemented to simply believing in one God. So that's one of the first, one of the first tensions between between Islam and nationalism in Indonesia. The formulation of the first principle, from the implementation of Sharia to simply mentioning the believing in one God. So that's in what happened in 1945, and then we went through the Revolutionary War from 1945 to 1949, and basically we can only settle the state from 1950 onward. In 1955, we had the first general elections in Indonesia. There were two general elections in 1955. First is general elections to elect the member of the Indonesian parliament. Second is the elections to elect the special body called the Constituante. Constituante is a structure with only single duties, which is to formulate Indonesian constitutions. Back then, we believed that the 1945 constitutions was only temporary constitutions, and that's why we established the Constituante to formulate the more proper constitutions. But then in the Constituante, there was a debate on the state ideology. There are some politicians that brought up the idea of Islam being the ideology of Indonesia, while the other politicians believe that we should stick to Pancasila as the melting pot of several ideologies. And the debates always reach some deadlock, so they decided to vote. Can you imagine that in 1955 onward, we were thinking about voting, about doing a voting to vote for which ideology actually suitable for Indonesia. But then before that happened, the president, Sukarno, dismissed the Constituante and declared that we went back to the 1945 constitutions. So that also put the halt on the debate of Indonesian ideology. So we no longer debated on the position of Islamist ideology from 1955 to quite some time later. In 1965, it's not directly related to the position of Islam and nationalism in Indonesia, but we should mention this because this is the beginning of transition to new order era. In the 1st of October 1965, several army generals were kidnapped and then later executed by some group of people that until today is still partly mysterious who they are actually. Some people believe that it is just the internal conflict of the army, but some people believe that it is also, there are some huge role played by the Indonesian Communist Party. So it's still debatable. There are some version of the story, but the actual fact was that some generals were killing, and then General Suharto began to step for the power, and then Sukarno was brought down from power in 1966 to 1967. So then after that, General Suharto became the second president of Indonesia, in which he focused on managing the ideology. In 1984, it's about 17 years after he was formally inaugurated as the president of the Republic of Indonesia, so about 17 years, he decreed what then was known as the sole principle policy. He declared that all political parties in Indonesia, all the organizations in Indonesia, all the institutions of Indonesia should only have Pancasila as their principle, not other kind of ideology. So by 1984, the state managed to uniformize the ideology to of the political parties and any other organizations to be really similar with the state ideology, which is Pancasila. So General Suharto was in power for about 32 years, and in 1998 he was forced to resign, to step down from power, following the political reform characterized by the riots on the street, student protests, and so forth. And as the general resigned from power, the ideological debates was partially reopened. People after 1998 are able to talk about Indonesian ideology once again. And in the representative body, some of the politicians started to talk about going back to the 22nd of June 1945, in which the first principle of Pancasila mentioned something about Islamic Sharia law being implemented in Indonesia. So that happens in the early of 2000s, but this didn't take any effect. But then instead of implementing Sharia at national level, some local governments started to implement local Sharia in their government. So from during the year of 2000s, local Sharia began to mushroom in Indonesia. And we will talk about that later. So that is the second aspect of my presentation today, is the history of the debates on Indonesian ideology between Islam and nationalism. The third issues is that I would like to address in this presentation is the Sharia law today. I can say that today Sharia implementations have switched. The Sharia implementation has switched target from formal national legislations to more local level, and also focusing more on financial sectors. And this is a very interesting development in Indonesia in the last actually, it has been started in 1991. The seed of this tendency have been started in 1991, but then it can only be fully taken place. It can only be fully take place after the political reform. So after the 2000s. So there are two things that we should look at very quickly in this opportunity. First, the local Sharia law in Indonesian politics, and second is the Sharia banking, because it really marks the appearance of Islam in daily life, in public life in Indonesia, more pragmatically rather than ideologically. So instead of debating the ideology, Islam as an ideology, these days people are talking about implementing Islamic law in more daily basis. Let's forget the ideology, but let's do something about being better Muslim in Indonesian politics. In local Sharia, for example, there has been tendency to the creations of local regulations. In Indonesia, it's known as the peraturan daerah or perda, the local religions, both at provincial level or at district level. these local regulations, many of these are partly or entirely based on Islamic law. Well, the picture display one of the most extreme implementations of the Islamic law at local level. In this picture, you can see that a man in white is being, ini mohon maaf cambuk, bahasa Inggrisnya apa ya? It's a rotten stick, yeah. The executor on the left hold a rotten stick and he beats the man in white. This is this picture. I believe this picture is taken in the province of Aceh. So in this province, if you break the law, for example, if you are stealing something, if you steal something, oh no, hang on, let me repeat that. If you do something wrong that is not covered by the criminal law, then they use the local law to give punishment. For example, if a woman and a man get together in a single place without anybody else, then it's regarded as breaching the law of wala taqrabu zina, don't approach zina. So while the zina itself is covered by the criminal law, doing something that closer to that is covered by the local regulations. So this is what happens if you, for example, if you are a married man, go out together with a married woman in a non-public place, then you got beaten in public. So that's what happened in Aceh. So then the tendency of Islamic local regulation is countered by similar regulation from other religious groups. For example, in Bali, there are some perda that is based on Hindu law. So today, there are no less than 24 of 34 provinces have religious inspired local regulations, mostly Islamic Sharia. But interestingly, I should mention this, most of these laws are initiated or were initiated by secular political parties. There are some religious political parties in Indonesia, but they are not the initiator of the local religion, the Sharia local religion. Most of the Sharia local religion were initiated by secular political parties, two of them being the Golkar and PDIP. PDIP is the ruling party in Indonesia because the current president was nominated by PDIP. So this is very interesting tendency in Indonesia. So there is about the local Sharia. Well, at the other aspect, there are some Sharia banking. It's really huge issue in Indonesia and Indonesian financial system. So Sharia banking is the finance system based on the concept of Islamic monetary system, which is a non-riba system. There has been some debates of what riba is in Indonesia, but some people believe that in the interest system in the conventional bank are regarded as riba, which is prohibited in Islam. So while the local Sharia law is more like elite driven, this Sharia banking is more demand driven. It come from the society, because there are some growing concern among some Muslims regarding the conventional interest system in the conventional bank. Interestingly, the Sharia banking is fully supported by the government through regulations and through state-owned banks. In the picture, you can see a bank called BSI. It's very new. Is the merger of three Indonesian Sharia bank into single Bank Syariah Indonesia, the Indonesian Sharia Bank. So today, 40.4% of Islamic bank industry is controlled by the state through BSI. So again, it's a very huge industry because it's demand driven. It's not very big though as compared to conventional banking system. It takes around 4% of the total bank industry in Indonesia. But still, it's a very interesting development because currently the ruling party is a secular political party. It's not even Islamic political party. So that's regarding the Sharia today. And last but not least, let's have a quick look at the prospect of Indonesian national and Islamic relationship. I personally believe, and many people believe, and also as a scientist, I believe that Indonesia will remain a nationalist, semi-secular state with some Islamic-inspired policies in many sectors in context. The general outfit of this country is still a nationalist secular state, but it's fully secular because the state still manages some aspect of religious group. For example, we have the Ministry of Religious Affairs that manage the, for example, the Haji pilgrimage, also manage some many aspects of social life of Muslim. For example, marriage. Marriage is handled by the special structure for Muslim groups. So Sharia law is actually implemented at national level, but in a more pragmatic way rather than ideological. But I also believe that debates and tensions regarding the position of religion along with nationalism in Indonesia will still exist. But this would, sorry about the typo, but this would take more pragmatic shapes in the future rather than ideological. So that's what I believe to be the future of Indonesian state. And lastly, I would suggest that the participants have a look at this very important book on Indonesian politics or Indonesian social and political life. It's a book edited by Professor Bob Havner. It's a Routledge Handbook of Contemporary Indonesia. I include the link to download the copy that we have in Gajah Mada University. I think the participant can download it for free. At least the participants can read the first chapter of this book. The chapter written by the editor regarding the general overview of Indonesian politics today. So thank you, Ms. Hassan. I give this back to you. So thank you, everyone. I hope this can trigger some further discussion. Thank you, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, sir, for your very comprehensive presentation. And during your presentation, we received a question from Mr. Waqas. So Waqas, I will be unmuting your mic and you can ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Abdul Gaffar. Your lecture was quite fascinating and enriching experience I had listening to you. I have a couple of questions which are interlinked, and I'll just ask them together so that you could just answer them. I'm just curious, has Indonesia always been an Islamic country? And if it's not been an Islamic country, when did Islam reach Indonesia? Because I was just trying to figure out why Sharia actually plays a large role in the state structure. And secondly, in my imagination, I just can't make a distinction between Malaysia and Indonesia. So I think it will be helpful if you could just guide us on how the state of Malaysia is different from Indonesia? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your question, sir. I will move on towards you again for answering the question.
Okay, so directly now. Yes, thank you, Mr. Hassan. Thank you, Mr. Halim. It's very interesting. Has Indonesia been Islamic countries? Well, as a modern Indonesia, as we know it today, it has never been an Islamic country ideologically. The Republic of Indonesia has never been an Islamic country. But as I mentioned earlier, there are some aspects of Muslim public affairs that are actually managed by the state. If you look at other countries, many countries do not manage some religious activities, but in Indonesia, the government do provide some support and manage some religious activities. I mentioned earlier about the Haji pilgrimage. Every year, in Indonesian Haji pilgrim are managed mostly by the Ministry of Religious Affairs, and it's managed through a very comprehensive method. So basically, if you are in Indonesia and Indonesian citizens, you pay some money, around, I believe it's 25 million rupiah, through the Ministry of Public Affairs to secure your seat in the Haji pilgrim. There has been long waiting list for Hajj, and I haven't been doing the Haji pilgrimage because I'm still in the waiting list. I hope that in the next couple of years I can do that. So if you're in Indonesia, you need to register yourself, pay some money, and then wait until you are called by the government. So in as such, I feel that we are actually an Islamic country because everything is also provided by the government. The government provide some significant support during the Ramadan, for example. There will be some Ramadan break, although it's not for the entire month, but there are some break during the Ramadan. Then there are some events managed by the state. So you can really feel that this is very much alike of an Islamic state. But no, formally we are not an Islamic country. We've never been an Islamic country. Prior to Indonesian state, though, there are some kingdoms across the. There were some kingdoms across the archipelago who were Islamic in all aspects. That's very similar to Malaysia with regard to your second question, Mr. Halim. We are very similar. Malaysia and Indonesia racially are very similar, ethnically are very similar. Both of us are partly Malay nations. Although, so in Southeast Asia, there is this huge ethnic group called the Malay ethnic group. And the vast majority of Malay ethnic group is the citizens of Malaysia this time. But there are also some Malay ethnic group in Indonesia, especially in the western part of Indonesia. And there are also some in state of Brunei. There are some in some part of the Thailand. And there are also some part of the Philippines. And probably also in the state of Singapore. So it's very, very huge ethnic group. So we are similar with Malaysia in that sense, that we have some really similar ethnic group. Probably the degree of similarity is between Indonesia and Malaysia is similar to the degree of similarity of Pakistan and India, although we don't have the history of being the same political entity in Indonesia. We have been separate political entities since the beginning, mostly because the geographical part that is now called Malaysia was under the British colonial government system, while Indonesia was under the Dutch government system. and it is a huge historical difference. But other than that, we speak similar language, really similar language, although honestly, Indonesia and Malaysia in many times avoid to speak Malay language because there are some confusion because there are some different vocabularies of English. So we prefer speak English when I meet some Malaysian friends, just to be, you know, yeah, to be precautious about some potential misunderstanding. So Mr. Halim, I hope this answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your very comprehensive answer. Our next question is from Ms. Ariba Rashid Khan. And before unmuting her, I would just like to again remind all of the participants that kindly make sure your questions are to the point and relevant to today's lecture. So Ariba, I am unmuting your mic and you may ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum. So first of all, I would like to say thanks for sharing such valuable information with us. I have a couple of questions that what are the main reasons of basically rise of nationalism in Indonesia? And is the nationalism affecting the economy of Indonesia? Thank you.
Well, nationalism and economy. Frankly speaking, this is not my area of expertise. So I might not be able to give, you know, prolonged answer. But in many aspects, there has been some issues in Indonesia regarding the food sovereignty, and in most aspects, it's really related to the issues of nationalism, and also in many aspects it relates to our neighboring countries, including Malaysia, that we have been discussed earlier. For example, there has been issues of land conversion from the food production into the palm plantation in Indonesia, because in 1980s to 1990s, there has been the growing industry of palm oil, and Indonesia has been in competition, if you like, with other countries in Southeast Asia to provide the ingredients for the palm oil. But then this raised the concern of the supply for food in Indonesia. We eat rice mostly, similar to the people in Pakistan, but we grow different kind of rice from your basmati rice, and it's a very Southeast Asia kind of rice. And we in Indonesia are in constant struggle to suffice the need of the rice for the whole Indonesians. In 1980s, the government proudly announced the what we call the swasembada, the self. Mohon maaf apa ya kira-kira bahasa Inggrisnya ya, Pak Dubes Niki. Swasembada, the self-sufficiency of rice. But starting in after the political reform, we have been unable to maintain the self-sufficient of rice production. So we have to import a huge amount of rice. And recently, for example, there are some issues in public debate, in discussion in Indonesia regarding the rice import, while we have so many farm and paddy field for to supply the rice, but yet we still import from other countries. So Ms. Rashid, I don't know if this answer your question, but again, I'm not really an expert in these issues. So thank you, Ms. Hassan.
Thank you so much, sir. And for the rest of the participants, I would like to inform all of you that this lecture will be uploaded on CGSS's YouTube channel. So in case if you want to look back at it, it will be available on YouTube. So because His Excellency is also online with us. So sir, if you would like to say something at the end of this session.
Well, thank you very much. I think I really enjoy discussions because, listening to the presentations by Dr. Gaffar, it gave me, additional information also on Indonesia, which is, I think, some of the aspects also very relevant to the Pakistan, because I guess being the two most populous Islamic Muslim countries in the world, I think the two countries share a lot of similarities, and I think this could also provide a good foundation for the enhancing the bilateral relations. And I think if we look at additional, if we look at the history of Indonesia, Islam came to Indonesia peacefully through the commercial activities from they started from Arab, Yemen, the Hadramaut area, and then also later on from Gujarat. There is a lot of finding which indicate that I guess Islam first arrived in Indonesia not too long after the Prophet of Muhammad ﷺ spread Islam to the Chinese, because there are some tombs in the Aceh area, or in Borneo's area, Kalimantan nowadays, which date back in the period not too far from the period whereby the Rasulullah ﷺ sent the invoice to China. So they dropped to the Aceh or in Sumatra or in Kalimantan. But those are the the beginnings of the Islam in Indonesia, which takes, I guess, it takes about 10 centuries before then reach the center of Java and spread toward Indonesia through the establishments of the I guess after the fall downs of the kingdom of Majapahit in I guess in 14th centuries, starting the spread of Islam. But Islam came to Indonesia through peaceful activities, unlike the colonial era, whereby they came to Indonesia with sword, blood and wars. But Islam came through peaceful, through the commercial activities of those who spreading the Islamic values on the way to China. So that's starting point of the Islam. And I guess in this situation, it relates also with the spreading of Islam in Malaysia, because at that time Indonesia and Malay is consisting one of the biggest area in the southeast of Asia. So with that, then Islam's beginnings to to get the support of the local community, starting on the 14th centuries, and with the establishments of one of the kingdoms in Indonesia, and we also have like 9 ulamas, Sunan, or I don't know, the saint of Islam who then helped spreading Islam toward Indonesia starting on the 14th centuries. That's the additional information that I would like to add to the presentations of Dr. Gaffar. Probably Dr. Gaffar can also make some point on how Islam spread in Indonesia before then, reaching out and evolving in the embryonals of the modern Indonesia, because the Islam also become a part of the dialogue when we composed the constitutions in 1945. And there was also some suggestions at that time to include the Sharia of Islam to be part of the Indonesian constitutions. But through the discussions in the establishments of Indonesia, when the founding father, the nationalisms prevails, and this continued to happen until nowadays, whereby some of the idea of political party, secular political party, to introduce the Islamic values, but in general terms, I can say that in general the nationalist prevails against the Islamic Islamic state of those who are proponents to have Islamic state of Indonesia. Some of the book recommended book to, I think Dr. Gaffar already mentions a book of the contemporary of Indonesia published by Routledge. There's several books also you can see whereby the Islam in Indonesia become one of the topic in, you can find, for instance, Islam and colonialism becoming modern in Indonesia and Malaysia. This is a book which is very, very interesting book. Or another book, for instance, Muslim democracies, politics, religion, society in Indonesia, Turkey, and the Islamic world. So to give, it is also published by Routledge. I think it's the collections edited by Edward Snyder. So there's a lot of book that also can be found to illustrate the Islam's how the Islam's also affects the discourse of Indonesia, and not only Indonesia. With those books, you can also get some thought on how the Islam also affecting the discourses in other Islamic countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. So as all of you must have heard, that His Excellency has just informed all of you that there are certain books that you can refer to as well while you're writing your articles, and also for enhancing your knowledge regarding Indonesia and the Muslim democracies of the world. First, listen to Professor Dr. Abdul Gaffar and then to listen to you. I think our participants must have learned a lot. So with that, we will conclude our today's session. Again, a very warm thank you to our guest speaker from Indonesia who joined us today and shared his presentation with us. And again, a big thank you to the Indonesian ambassador, His Excellency, who joined us from the start for this session. So thank you so much, sir, once again. And with that, we will conclude our today's session. And we will share these name of books with you as well, as students are asking for it. And the lecture will also be uploaded on our YouTube channel. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. We will see you guys in the next session.